Jake, Matt, Billy, and Tyler were best friends. They loved adventure. And well, summer vacation meant camping time. The woods behind their town were perfect. This year they felt brave. They packed flashlights, a pocket knife, and even some firecrackers. This time, they were ready for anything.
All right, guys, let's check our supplies.
Jake, the oldest, checked their supplies. Matt, the bravest, held the firecrackers. Billy, the quiet one, sharpened the pocket knife. Tyler, the youngest, double-checked the flashlight batteries. They were a good team. This year would be different. This year, they wouldn't be scared. The sun dipped below the trees, shadows grew long and dark. The boys reached their favorite clearing. It was deep in the woods. A small stream trickled nearby. They felt like explorers in a hidden world.
Let's set up the tent here, guys.
They set up their tent. Jake and Matt collected firewood. Billy started the fire. Tyler hung their lanterns on a low branch. The flames crackled. The woods were quiet. For now, there were no strange noises. Just the sounds of the forest at twilight. The boys huddled closer to the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on their faces. It was time for scary stories. Legends were a part of camping, and the legend of the skunk ape was the scariest of all.
They say it roams these very woods, a creature tall and hairy with glowing red eyes.
And a stench that can knock you out.
Matt's voice trembled just a little.
They say it steals food from campsites, and sometimes it takes people too.
Tyler, his eyes wide with fear, clutched his flashlight like a weapon. A twig snapped in the darkness. The boys froze. The night was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing longer and more menacing with each passing second. Their hearts pounded in their chests. Each breath they took was shallow and quick, their eyes darting around, trying to pierce the thick veil of darkness that surrounded them. They had ventured into the forest on a dare, but now they were regretting every step that had led them here. A figure emerged from the trees. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if it knew the effect it was having on the boys. The air grew colder, and a shiver ran down their spines. They could barely make out its shape, but it was enough to send waves of terror through their bodies. It was tall and hairy. The creature's silhouette was massive, towering over the boys. Its fur seemed to absorb the light, making it appear even more ominous. The boys had heard stories about the skunk ape, but they had never believed them, until now. Red eyes glowed in the darkness. They were like burning embers, piercing through the night and locking onto the boys. Those eyes seemed to see right through them, and the boys felt a primal fear, one that reached deep into their very souls. It was the skunk ape, the legendary creature that haunted the local folklore, a beast said to roam the forests at night searching for its next victim. The boys had always laughed at the tales, but now, faced with the creature itself, they were no longer laughing.
Oh no, it's the skunk ape. The words were barely a whisper, choked out through a throat tight with fear. The boys exchanged terrified glances, each one hoping that this was just a bad dream, that they would wake up safe in their beds.
The boys screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, echoing through the forest and startling the nocturnal creatures that called it home. Their screams seemed to hang in the air, a testament to their fear. They scrambled to their feet. Panic had taken over, and their only thought was to get away from the creature as fast as possible. They stumbled over roots and rocks, their legs feeling like jelly, but the adrenaline kept them moving. Jake grabbed a burning log from the fire. In his desperation, he reached for the only weapon he could find. The log was heavy and hot, but he barely noticed, his focus entirely on the creature before him. He thrust it towards the creature. The flames danced in the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the trees. The creature recoiled slightly, but it didn't back down. Instead, it seemed to grow even more menacing. The figure let out a roar. It was a sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet, a deep, guttural noise that resonated in their bones. The boys felt their courage waver, the primal fear threatening to overwhelm them. It was a terrifying sound, one that they would never forget, a sound that would haunt their nightmares for years to come. It was the sound of something ancient and powerful, something that should not be disturbed. But then, it began to laugh. The laughter was jarring, a stark contrast to the fearsome roar. It was a mocking, cruel sound, and it took the boys a moment to realize what was happening.
Gotcha, guys! The voice was familiar, and as the figure stepped into the light, The boys' fear turned to confusion and then to anger.
It was Derek and Luke, two older boys from town. They had always been the pranksters, the ones who loved to scare the younger kids. This time, they had outdone themselves. The boys' initial terror gave way to relief, but that relief was quickly replaced by anger. They had been genuinely scared, and now they felt foolish for falling for the prank. Derek and Luke had dressed up as the skunk ape to scare them. The costume was elaborate, complete with glowing red eyes and a voice modulator to create the terrifying roar. They had planned everything down to the last detail. Relief washed over the boys, followed by anger. They had been tricked. The fear that had gripped them so tightly was now replaced by a burning desire for revenge. They knew they couldn't let Derek and Luke get away with this. The night was far from over, and the tables were about to turn. Derek and Luke left, their laughter echoing through the trees. The boys calmed down. They tried to laugh it off.
It had just been a prank. A mean one, but still just a prank.
They thought the night was over. They were wrong. Something rustled in the undergrowth. It wasn't the wind. This time it was a different sound. Heavier. Closer.
Could it be Derek and Luke again?
No, this felt different. This felt real.
The creature stepped into the moonlight. It towered over them. Its eyes glowed an eerie red. The stench hit them like a wall. It was a foul mix of rotten eggs and skunk spray.
It was no prank. This was the skunk ape.
The boys were paralyzed with fear. They had never been so scared in their lives. The skunk ape snarled. Its breath reeked. It lunged for their supplies, scattering their food and gear. It was hungry, and it was angry. Jake was the first to recover. He knew they had to act fast. He grabbed the pack of firecrackers. Matt fumbled with the lighter, his hands shaking. Finally, a spark. The fuse sizzled.
Here goes nothing.
Matt threw it towards the creature. The firecracker exploded with a deafening bang. The skunk ape roared in pain and surprise. The boys didn't hesitate. They grabbed more firecrackers, lighting them and throwing them with all their might.
Keep going, guys. We can drive it away.
The boys fought back with everything they had, their fear turning into determination. The clearing became a chaotic battleground of light and sound. The skunk ape, blinded and confused by the exploding firecrackers, thrashed wildly. It was enough.
Now's our chance. Run!
The boys saw their chance. They made a run for it. They didn't stop running until they reached the edge of the woods. They burst into the moonlight, gasping for breath, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had escaped, but the terror of that night would stay with them forever. They huddled together, catching their breath, their clothes torn, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. The night had been long and unforgiving, filled with shadows that seemed to move and whisper. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig had sent shivers down their spines. They had run for what felt like hours, their legs burning, their hearts pounding in their chests. Now, as they sat in a small clearing, the reality of their ordeal began to sink in. The town lights flickered in the distance, a beacon of safety and normalcy. Those lights represented everything they had taken for granted: warmth, comfort, and the reassuring presence of other people. The contrast between the dark, menacing forest and the welcoming glow of the town was stark. It was as if the lights were calling out to them, promising refuge from the terrors of the night. They had never been so happy to see those lights. Relief washed over them, mingling with the exhaustion and fear that still clung to their minds. They exchanged glances, their eyes reflecting a shared understanding of the ordeal they had just survived. The sight of the town lights gave them the strength to stand up, to take those first steps back towards safety, to be back in their world. The path ahead seemed clearer now, each step bringing them closer to the familiar, to the known. They walked in silence, each lost in their thoughts, the events of the night replaying in their minds. The forest, once a place of adventure and mystery, had turned into a nightmare. But now, with the town in sight, they felt a glimmer of hope.
Did that really happen? The question hung in the air, heavy with doubt and disbelief. It was hard to reconcile the terror they had felt with the safety they now approached. The boy's voice trembled, betraying the fear that still gripped him.
I don't know, but it felt real. The response was hesitant, uncertain. The memories of the night were vivid yet surreal. The fear, the running, the creature they had seen, it all felt like a twisted dream. But the dirt on their clothes, the scratches on their skin, and the lingering fear in their hearts told them it had been all too real.
I can still smell it. That awful stench. The boy's voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder might summon the creature back. The smell had been the most tangible part of their encounter, a putrid, overwhelming odor that clung to their senses. It was a reminder that what they had faced was not just a figment of their imagination.
As they walked, they whispered about what they had seen. Had it been real? The questions swirled in their minds, each trying to make sense of the night's events. They spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid the forest might hear them and bring the nightmare back to life. The darkness around them seemed to press in, amplifying their fears and doubts. Or had the darkness played tricks on their minds? The forest was a place of shadows and illusions, where the line between reality and imagination blurred. The boys had heard stories of the forest, tales of creatures and spirits that roamed the woods at night, but they had never believed them, until now. The night's events had shaken their beliefs, leaving them questioning what was real and what was not. The stench lingered in their nostrils, a grim reminder of the creature they had encountered. It was a smell unlike anything they had ever known, a foul, acrid odor that seemed to seep into their very souls. As they neared the edge of the forest, the smell began to fade, replaced by the familiar scents of the town. But the memory of it, and the fear it brought, would stay with them for a long time. The next day, they told their story to anyone who would listen, their parents, their friends. They recounted every detail, every shadow, every sound that had sent chills down their spines. They spoke with urgency, their voices trembling with the remnants of fear. They hoped that someone, anyone, would understand the terror they had faced. But no one believed them. The adults dismissed it as a figment of their imagination, a tale spun from the darkness of the night. Their friends laughed, thinking it was just another one of their wild stories, a prank to scare them. It was just a story, a tale to be told around campfires, a way to pass the time and entertain. No one took it seriously. It was easier to believe that it was all made up, a product of their overactive imaginations, The boys felt the frustration building inside them. They knew what they had seen, what they had experienced. It was real, more real than anything they had ever known. But how could they make others see that? But the boys knew the truth. They had seen it with their own eyes. They had felt the cold grip of fear, the paralyzing terror that had seized them. They were determined to prove it, to show everyone that it wasn't just a story.
"We saw it! We all did!" they exclaimed, their voices filled with a mix of fear and excitement. They described the creature, the way it moved, the sound it made. They were desperate for someone to believe them.
"Why won't anyone believe us?" they asked, their voices tinged with frustration and sadness. They couldn't understand why no one would take them seriously. They had faced something terrifying, something that had changed them forever.
They carried the memory of that night like a scar. It was a wound that wouldn't heal, a constant reminder of what they had faced. They huddled together, finding comfort in each other's presence, knowing that they were the only ones who truly understood. It was a secret they shared, a bond forged in fear and adrenaline. It changed them. They whispered about it in the dark, reliving the moments, the fear, the adrenaline. It was a bond that tied them together, a shared experience that no one else could understand. They were no longer the same boys who had set out on that camping trip. They had been changed by what they had seen, by the fear they had felt. They walked with a new awareness, a new understanding of the world around them. They had looked into the eyes of something wild and unknown. It had stared back at them, leaving an indelible mark on their souls. They knew that they would never forget that night, that it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The boys still went camping, but never again in those woods. The legend of the skunk ape lived on in their whispers. A cautionary tale told around campfires, a reminder that some things are best left undisturbed. The woods held secrets, they knew. Secrets best left hidden in the shadows. The end.